Chris Philp, we understand that the government plans to introduce harsher measures to bring down numbers of asylum seekers and increase the numbers being returned. Will you welcome this?
Well, where it makes sense, we'll of course support sensible steps. What the government has announced, I think, is a combination of very small steps in the right direction with a few gimmicks as well. Of course, over the last year and a half, we've had all kinds of gimmicks from this government. Remember, they used to claim they were going to smash the gangs. Then they said they were going to intercept, well, the French would intercept boats near the French shore. Then they said they were going to have a one-in, one-out deal, which has turned out to be 16,000 people coming in since they announced it and only 100 going out, meaning people have a 99.5% chance of staying. So some of these announcements, I'm afraid, are gimmicks in that vein. There are one or two small steps in the right direction, and where there are, yes, we'll support them.
It's a bit mean to describe the lifting of the period from which you'll have to be here to apply for permanent settlement from 5 to 20 years. So that's quite a big step.
Well, we've already actually said they should go a lot further. We've said it should be 10 years for everybody, and we've said for illegal immigrants, and they've said for them it should be 20 years. We say for illegal immigrants, they shouldn't get asylum and they should be deported within a week of arrival. So I'm afraid to say, compared to the proposals that we set out at our party conference, what Shabana Mahmood is saying today is a lot weaker.
Well, you could always say that you want to do that, but with respect, you wanted to do all sorts of things, but you didn't have the machinery to do it. Surely, perhaps she's being a little bit more realistic than you were, because you promised all sorts of things. You promised to bring down immigration below 100,000, and actually it went up to a net figure north of 700,000.
Well, look, the Conservative Party is now under new leadership. Kemi Badenoch was never Prime Minister. I was never Home Secretary. We've now got a different approach. And I'll tell you what is realistic. In order to control our borders, we need to come out of the ECHR. You know, one of the country's top barristers wrote us a 200-page report analysing the law around borders. And it's basically impossible to control a country's borders while inside the ECHR. So that's why we now are proposing to come out of it completely. That would enable us to control our borders, for example, by deporting every illegal immigrant within a week of arrival. But that is not something, apparently, which this Labour government is prepared to do.
You couldn't even get anybody off the ground to Rwanda, for goodness sake, and that was your big policy. And you're now promising to deport every illegal immigrant, by which we're now talking hundreds of thousands of people, by the way.
And what stopped the Rwanda scheme? It was the ECHR.
No.
We had to pass a new law to overcome the application of that. And it was ready to go, by the way, just after the election. And what did Keir Starmer do? He cancelled that Rwanda plan just days before it was due to start. The first plane was due to go off on July the 24th of last year. And because he cancelled that with no replacement, the numbers crossing the channel have surged under this Labour government.
All right, what you're trying to tell me is that you would be even tougher than Shabana
Substantially tougher.
Mahmood.
I've given you a couple of examples.
Let me give you an opportunity to be tougher. One of the things that we haven't heard from the government yet is how they respond to the part of the Danish system which is to limit access to public housing to asylum seekers and immigrants where it's thought there are too many such people in an area. So they've identified in Denmark 63 areas where they won't put asylum seekers on the grounds that there are too many. And they'll even demolish an apartment block if they think there are too many. Are you ready to go that far to make Britain a hostile environment for asylum seekers?
Well, I don't think we're proposing to demolish apartment blocks. What we are proposing to do is say that we want no illegal immigration whatsoever. Stop the problem at source before people even get here.
That's a slogan. I'm putting you to a very practical measure that the Danes have adopted, which is to say that in no area will we put asylum seekers if there are more than... the numbers they have are 30% of what they call non-Westerners in the particular area. Would you go as far as that? Because that is the answer to reducing demand from asylum seekers. No asylum seeker wants to go to a place where they won't be able to live near their people who speak their language and their mosques and so on.
Well, I think the way to stop the demand, to stop the pull factor, isn't to start demolishing apartment blocks or to move people around. The way to stop demand is to be clear that if anyone enters this country illegally, whether by small boat or any other means, they will immediately, within a week, get deported back to their country of origin, if safe or possible, or to a safe third country. That will end the pull factor.
You keep making the statement that you're going to do something, which you conspicuously failed to get anywhere near in the 14 years you were in government, even when you were the immigration minister. Come on.
Well, that is because we were in the ECHR at the time, and we've now reached the conclusion.
You just didn't have the machinery to do it.
That's not true. What stopped us doing those things was being in the ECHR, and that is why we now need to come out of the ECHR so we can do these things and make sure anyone entering the country illegally gets rapidly removed. Then there won't be a pull factor in the first place.
All right. Well, look, your colleague Katie Lamb, I think, touched on this when she said a rather interesting thing about people. She said, and we can put up the quote, it's not the fault of the individuals who came here. They just shouldn't have been able to do so. They should go home. What that will leave is a mostly but not entirely culturally coherent group of people. Now, we can get into whether the language is right or not, but the sense is that the aim is to create this cultural coherence, to stop, essentially, these separate communities building up. Do you agree with the sense of what she said?
Well, there's a couple of points that I would make myself. The first is that numbers coming into this country, both illegally and legally, for many years now, have been far, far too high. We've had very high numbers coming in without integration, and that has meant, in some parts of the country, we have seen communities growing up which have their own cultural identity that is dominant and is separate to British identity. And I think we need to see a society where there is a British identity and a British culture that everybody signs up to. Because without that, you have a divided nation. And as Abraham Lincoln said in a different context, a divided house can't stand. Now, that is partly a question of numbers and dramatically reducing numbers. It also means removing people who have no right to be here. And we think there are between 1 and 2 million people here illegally, and they should be removed.
But, you know, I've put to you a simple proposition, which, let's go back to the Danes, which they are very strong on. Yes, control the borders, but also make it a requirement for people to integrate language, where they live, when they can bring in spouses. So, for example, they've put an age limit on when you can bring in spouses, and what they tell you in Denmark is that actually that has reduced, if you like, the practice of bringing in new migrants for family reunion absolutely dramatically. Now, I agree with that.
I agree with that. Okay. I agree with the fact that English language should be non-negotiable. So we should not be spending tens or hundreds of millions of pounds on translation.
But if I may say so, every time I put something to you, you tell me what your objective is, but you tell me you're not that keen on the method. So I understand what your objective might be, but you don't seem to have any idea how you would actually achieve any of these things.
That's not true. Let me give you 4 or 5 concrete examples. Right. Firstly, numbers. We need to have a cap on legal inward migration each year, so the numbers are very, very dramatically lower. We need to deport every single illegal immigrant within a week of arrival. There are between 1 and 2 million people here illegally. We need to deport all of those. We need to have a requirement for English language. We should no longer be funding English language lessons, and I agree with the Danish family policy. We should only allow people to bring family members in where both spouses are over, say, 23 or 24, and there should be an income requirement, so only people earning decent amounts of money, say £38,000 or higher, can bring in family members. So you asked some specifics, Trevor. There are 5 or 6 specifics straight off the bat there.
That's your policy, but
none of which, by the way, you're going to hear from Shabana Mahmood.
Well, I'll tell you. We'll hear we hear from her when she's in the seat. But the truth is, you're in an uncomfortable position. You're in an uncomfortable position because she shot your fox, hasn't she?
Nonsense.
You just can't be tougher than she can. You can say the words, but in truth, you can't actually deliver.
Well, I'm afraid that's complete nonsense because she is proposing to stay in the ECHR. She's proposing to try and tinker with Article 8, which Theresa May tried unsuccessfully to do. She's going to try and renegotiate Article 3, apparently, but you can't do that because it's absolute. We, by contrast, will come out of the ECHR entirely. We have a policy of completely refusing to even hear asylum claims from illegal immigrants. She does propose to hear them and give them a path to citizenship, albeit after 20 years. So there are 2 examples straight away there where what Shabana Mahmood is saying is frankly too weak. and won't get control of our borders.
Well, this all sounds quite tough, but we can discuss. We'll no doubt discuss many times whether it really is. One last question, really. You and your leader have been saying that the government gives the appearance of being weak and divided and rudderless and chaotic in a death spiral. Of course, your party would know all about that because that's exactly where you spent several years. What's your advice to Keir Starmer?
Well, we've obviously, as a party, moved on from that and we're now united behind our leader. But clearly the Labour Party are unable to do that. They are fighting like rats in a sack. You've got Keir Starmer briefing against Wes Streeting. You've got Angela Rayner sharpening the knives in the background. Goodness knows what Bridget Phillipson and Lucy Powell are both up to. Instead of serving the national interest, the Labour government are fighting each other just weeks away from a budget that will unleash enormous tax rises on this country, that will drive up unemployment even further. It's hit a sort of 5-year high already. Instead of serving the national interest, they are fighting each other and they should get a grip of themselves.